Hello? It has been some time since my last upload. Just a couple quick announcements before we start the video today. This summer, 2019, there is a ton of content coming. I'm super excited about all the ideas and platforms and of course all new videos that are going to be released. I'll also be way more active from here on out, so please follow me on Instagram at brollandboardgames and of course subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss anything. So the premise behind Brass is that you're an entrepreneur during England's Industrial Revolution, and you're basically trying to build the biggest empire by making cotton mills and coal mines and canals and so on. You'll be playing Birmingham over 2 time periods, which are the Canal Era and the Rail Era, and then you score points at the end of each era with the most victory points being declared the winner. Now the board for Brass has both a day side and a night side. You want to pick one side and place it in the center. If you're playing with less than 4 players, take out all the cards and the merchant tiles that show the symbol more than your number of players. So let's say you're playing with 2 people, then you want to take out all the cards with 3 and 4 player symbols on the side of the card. Then separate out the wild location cards, which looks like this, and the wild industry location cards, which look like this. And then put both of these face up on 2 of the card draw areas. With the rest of the cards, go ahead and shuffle those and put them face down in the card draw area on the top left of the main board. You then want to separate 3 and 4 player merchant tiles, shuffle these merchant tiles, and then put one face up on each of the merchant spaces. Now these spaces look like this along all the edges of the board, so if you're playing with 2 players, you don't have to place any tiles on Warrington and on Nottingham, and for 3 players, you don't put any on Nottingham itself. Now set up these cool little beer barrels next to the merchant tiles that aren't blank. 1 black cube goes on each space of the coal market, leaving the £1 space open. An orange cube goes on each of the spaces of the iron market, also leaving the dotted spaces open. And then the rest of the cubes and beer barrels just go next to the board to make a general supply. Money also goes next to the board to make the bank. And then the last thing you need for a general setup, just so you know, the colors of the location banners also tell you which location cards are on the draw deck, and this changes with the player count. So for a 2-player game, blue and teal location cards are not in the draw deck, and for 3 players, teal location cards are not in the draw deck, and of course for 4 players, you'll have access to every single location on the board. Now for player setup, have each player take a player mat, £17 from the bank, and have each person pick a colored character tile, placing the matching link tiles in your play area, and then you want to start stacking the matching colored industry tiles. Now along the main board, you'll see a progress track. Put your victory point marker, which are these little colored hexagons, on the 0 point space. And then you also want to put your income marker on the 10 space of the progress track, which are the colored circles instead. Then you want to draw 8 cards, which will make up your starting hand, and draw 1 additional card and put it face down in your play area, which will be your discard pile. Now last step, once every player is done setting up, shuffle everyone's character tiles together and put them in a random order on the turn order track on the bottom left of the main board. So how do you play Brass Birmingham? There are 8, 9, or 10 rounds in the game, depending on whether or not you have 4, 3, or 2 players. In every round, you'll take turns in order depending on the order that you set up in the beginning. Now on your first turn, which will be in the Canal Era, you only get to perform 1 action. Now from then on, you get to perform 2 actions every turn, and then you can also perform the same action twice. So let's go over the 6 possible actions that you can choose from in the Canal Era, and then we'll shift over to the Rail Era because they're a little bit different. First is the build action, and to build you have to discard a specific card. There are 4 different cards in the game. Now these cards with banners printed with a name are location cards that will let you build in a specific area, even if it's not part of your network. Now the second one is a wild location card. It's super easy. You can just use that to count as any location, just like how a wild card would normally do in other games, except the 2 farm breweries located here. You can recognize them right away because they're the only locations without names. Industry cards can also be used to build the resources listed on the corner of the card, as long as it's part of your network. Now one more exception to this is at the beginning of the game, you won't have any networks at all, so you can use an industry tile to build anywhere where you match resources. And the last one is a wild industry card. So similar to the wild location card, you can use this to count for any type of industry card. Now these wild cards also have their own discard piles, and the other cards get discarded right over here. Okay, so let's say you discarded a location card. Now you're going to take the lowest level of any industry you want and place it with the black half face down on a place you want to put it, as long as you either match the industry's icon like the cotton mill to the cotton mill, or if it has a double like the cotton mill coal under Nuneaton. You can place the cotton mill here too. Now remember, we're in the Canal Era, meaning you can only build 1 tile at any location. and you can only buy tiles with this blue half moon symbol for now. You also have to pay for the industry tile, and the cost of it is shown on the left slot of your player mat. You put the money on your character tile on the turn order track. That way we can keep track of how much each person spends every single turn. Now the last part of building an industry tile is to consume coal from the main board. Once you place your tile down, you look at these links connected to that tile. If they're equally distant, you can pick to consume any coal from any of those places, and it doesn't matter if it's another person's coal, so just take one and put it back in the general supply. If one location doesn't have it, you trace links to the next available coal mine. On top of that, once a location runs out of coal, you flip it over to the half black side, and that person receives income listed by moving the income marker that number of spaces. Just know that you can't go higher than 99 pounds for the maximum income. Now that player will also get the victory points shown at the bottom left of the little tile at the end of the canal era. Oh, I know what you're asking now, but what if you're not connected to any coal at all? Well, as long as you're able to trace the connected line to one of the spaces on the edge that has a coal symbol with the double arrows, aka the coal market, then you'll be fine. All you have to do is pay the pounds listed here and start taking coal from the lowest amount first. And if you ever run out, you can always buy coal for 8 pounds shown here at the top. Now what about consuming the orange iron? So iron is a little bit different because you can buy iron from any spot on the board and it doesn't have to be linked like coal does. You can even take iron from different ironworks, so you can take one from this location and then another from over here. Now like coal, if there's no iron on the board, you can then buy iron from the iron market. But this time you don't have to be linked anywhere. All you have to do is pay the iron cost and start taking from the lowest cost. And then it'll cost 6 pounds if you ever empty out the rest. Okay, let's talk about a few more things and then I'll summarize the build action overall. If you built a coal mine, ironworks, or brewery, match the resources by putting the coal, iron, or beer on that tile. Now only one beer goes on the industry tile for the canal era. If you built a coal mine that's connected to a merchant space or ironworks that isn't connected to the market at all, once you put cubes on the industry tile, move all those cubes that you just put on to fill the market space, filling up the most expensive ones first. Now even at the beginning of the game when these are empty, you must fill these once you start building. For every cube that you move though, you also get to collect money that's shown on the left space. And again, if all the resources are depleted, then you can flip the tile over and then advance your income tracker. But let's say all the market spaces are filled up and these were initially open in the beginning, and then a spot is emptied after an industry tile is built. Well, that means the resources on the industry tile will stay here and they won't move anymore to the market. Now what if you have no industry or link tiles on the board? Now if you don't, you have two choices. One, you can discard an industry card in order to build the matching industry tile in any location as long as the industry symbols match. Two, you can also discard any card to build a link tile from any undeveloped line on the board. Now earlier we mentioned farm breweries, which are the two unnamed spots on the board. You can only build in these locations using either a brewery industry card or a wild industry card, and you will need one link tile in order to connect Canuck to the farm brewery to the left. And for the other one, you also need one link tile max to connect Kittermeister to Worcester and the brewery to the left. Okay, the last part of the build action. You can replace your own tiles by building over it as long as it is a higher level of the same industry. If there's leftover iron or coal, those go back to the general supply. So if you want to replace an opponent's tile, you can only overbuild over their coal mine or their ironworks. And there has to be no resource cubes on the whole board, including the market. So if you decide to overbuild industry tiles, return them to the box, and these will actually not score any victory points at all, but you will still get to keep the previous income and or victory points that were generated previously. So I know it's a lot to take in, but let's do a overall review of the build action. First, discard one out of the 4 possible cards that you have. Then take the lowest level industry tile on your player mat and put it on the build location that matches the symbol. Make sure it's the only industry tile that you have in that location since we are in the canal era. And then you pay the money cost on your character tile. There are 3 conditions to this. 1, if you built a coal mine or ironworks, then you get to put the corresponding number of cubes right on the tile, or 1 beer if you built a brewery. And then you want to move these cubes to fill up the market if there's an empty spot, collecting coins that match with the level that you're filling up. The second condition is if you built a industry tile that shows these kinds of symbols, it means you'll need to consume coal or iron by taking coal from a linked coal mine, or if there aren't any, from the market. Now remember though that for iron, you don't need any connection. Now once resources have been taken, that's when you flip the tile over, and then the player whose tile was flipped over will advance their income and then gain victory points at the end of the era. And the final condition is if you are building but have no industry or link tiles on the board, all you have to do is discard an industry card in order to build a matching industry at an undeveloped location, or discard any card in order to build a link on an undeveloped tile. The only special case of this is for farm breweries, which just needs a link at either of these spots in order to connect them. And lastly, overbuilding is when you replace one of your buildings with a higher level and then put all these leftover cubes, if there are any, back into the supply. But you can also replace an opponent's tile as long as it's a coal mine or ironworks, and as long as there are no resource cubes for that tile anywhere on the board, including in the market. Players will not lose previously gained income or victory points, but they do not score the victory points from the overbuilt tile that is going back to the supply. I know it's a little confusing, but all they're saying is if you already gained victory points from this tile before, you keep those. But if you haven't scored it for this era, then you'll get points from the overbuilt tile instead of the older one that you just replaced. So it's not too bad once you look at it like that. And the rest of the actions are really straightforward. So build action was number 1. Number 2 is to sell. And to do so, you just have to make sure that you're connected to one of these merchant tiles. You start off by discarding a card, just like the build action, and then pick one of your unflipped cotton mill, manufacturer, or pottery tiles that's connected to a matching merchant tile. Then go ahead and consume the required amount of beer that's shown on the top right corner of that industry tile. So what's cool about this is if that merchant tile is connected to a beer barrel, you can actually consume that beer barrel and also collect the merchant beer bonus. There are 4 bonuses that you can get represented by all these different symbols. The light bulb means that you can develop by taking the lowest level industry tile from your player mat, unless it's the pottery tile with this red no circle icon. The income marker means you move your income tracker by 2. This symbol means you get 4 victory points. And the 4 symbol just simply means that you get £5 from the bank. So you discarded a card, made sure your unflipped industry tile is connected to a merchant tile, consumed beer, and collected a beer bonus. And now you can flip the industry tile and advance your income marker a number of spaces shown on the bottom right corner of that tile. Number 3 is to loan. So as you can guess, start off by first discarding 1 card. Remember, anytime you're discarding a card to perform an action, they'll all go to the discard pile unless they are wild cards, which goes back into their own card draw area. Then take £30 from the bank, and loans aren't something that you pay back in brass. So instead you move your income marker 3 levels backwards, not spaces. You can't take a loan if it will take you below -10. So that's it for loan. The next action is the scout action, which will let you gain more wild cards. Now for this one, you discard any 3 cards from your hand, and then you take 1 wild location card and 1 wild industry location card. Super easy. You can't scout though if you already have a wild card in your hand. Action number 5 is to develop, which lets you remove industry tiles from your player mat so you can upgrade your buildings. So discard a card, then remove 1 or 2 tiles from your player mat and then return them back to the box. Each tile is taken out separately and they don't have to be from the same industry. In exchange, you get 1 iron from each tile that you removed. Pottery tiles that show the red light bulb I mentioned earlier during the sell action also cannot be developed. So you have to remove these specific tiles during your build action, and you also have to remove them in order to get your higher level pottery tiles. That brings us to the last possible action that you can take, which is the network action. You discard a card, put a link on an undeveloped line on a board, making sure it's adjacent to a location that is part of your network. For the canal era, you can only build canal links on undeveloped lines for £3, and building 1 canal counts as 1 full action. Okay, so let's put everything together and then we'll add on the rail era and endgame. To play Brass Birmingham, you get 2 actions on your turn. You can build by putting a industry tile on the board, putting matching resources shown on the bottom right of that tile, first moving coal or iron to the market if the market is empty, and then sometimes you can overbuild coal or iron by upgrading that tile. For the canal era, you can only have 1 industry tile per location. But sometimes you'll have to consume coal to build some tiles, and you can check this by looking at where the tiles are connected, or you can also consume coal straight from the market. Now if you can build, you can also sell, which lets you flip an industry tile once you discard a card and then connect to a merchant tile. This time you'll be consuming beer, and again by checking connections and by collecting beer bonuses. Let's say you don't have enough money. You can ask for a loan by discarding a card and taking £30 from the bank, but the downside is you do lose levels from your income tracker. But then what if you need help trying to build a specific industry? That's when the scout action comes into play, where you discard 3 cards in order to gain a wild location and a wild industry. So what if you want to upgrade industries without having to build all these lower level tiles of that industry? Then you can discard a card and then choose to use the develop action, removing industry tiles and then consuming 1 iron for each one that was removed. And lastly, the question is, what if you want to expand your links? That's when the network action comes into play, where you pay £3 in order to build 1 canal link per action. So now you have no more cards to discard, and now it's time to end the canal era. You do 2 things now. First, for each of your link tiles, you gain 1 victory point by progressing your marker, and then removing those link tiles as you score them. Now second, after everyone removed their linked tiles, you score victory points again for each flipped industry tile. Every industry tile that's not flipped doesn't give you any points, just make a note of it somewhere. Those two actions you perform at the end of both eras. For the canal era specifically, you also perform 3 additional steps. You're going to take out any obsolete industries, so all level 1 industry tiles on the main board. These are removed from the game. And then you reset the merchant beer by putting a beer barrel on the empty beer barrel space. And then shuffle each player's discard pile and then put the cards face down in the card draw area. So to begin the rail era, you don't put any face down cards this time in order to make a discard pile. Now if you want to build in this era, you can't build anything with the canal era symbol anymore. So in order to build all these higher level ones, you'll have to use the develop action in order to get rid of the lower level industry tiles on your player board. And now you can also start putting 2 beer barrels on these tiles, along with building multiple industries at one location. In the rail era, locations are only linked using the trains on the railroads, not canals, hence the name for the 2 eras. Now these railroads cost £5 and 1 coal to build, or £15, 2 coal, and 1 beer in order to build 2 railroads. So, no face down card for the discard pile. Develop in order to get rid of your level 1 tiles on your mat. You put 2 beer barrels on these tiles. You can build multiple industries in one location. And using railroads are all new changes to the rail era. Everything else stays the same as the canal era. So both eras are played in rounds, and there are 8, 9, or 10 rounds in a 4 to 3 to 2 player game respectively. You can keep discarding cards in order to perform 2 out of the 6 actions that we talked about until you run out of cards to draw and to use. Then you determine turn order by looking at who spent the least amount of money, and they'll be first for the next round with the person who spent the most going last this time. If they ever spend the same amount of money, then the order stays the same, and then you can put all this money on the characters back to the bank. Now secondly, you take income from the bank that's equal to your level income, but you don't collect income for the last round of the game. If you're at a negative income, you actually have to pay back the bank, and if you can't pay them back, then you have to remove your industry tiles from the board. Each tile is going to be worth half of the cost, and you get to keep any excess money that you make. Now if it really comes down to it and you can't pay anything at all, then you start to lose 1 victory point for each £1 that you owe. Now this is the only time that you can sell industry tiles for money, so you can't keep selling industry tiles once you pay out the bank if you're negative in income level. The winner is the person with the most victory points by the end of the rail era. And if it's a tie, the person with the highest income wins. A double tie goes to the person with the most leftover money. So that's Brass Birmingham. Solid Industrial Revolution cobblestone feel to it. Love the theme. If you guys like these videos and find them helpful, it'd be pretty cool if you subscribe and hit the notification bell. Definitely check out my Instagram, as I mentioned earlier, in the description below, where I'm way more active and I update the progress of each game along with a bunch of giveaways now. Thanks for watching.